So being here today with all of you professionals in life skills and lifelong learning is just something that's very humbling. I'm very grateful to be here. I'm very appreciative of that. And what I want to do is talk with you about awareness. And there's a saying, you know, awareness, use it or lose it, right? So let's use it. And what I want to share with you is a personal odyssey. So that's where the nervousness and also the excitement comes in, because I'm very excited to share that with you about my own life story. Now, there's no judgment in the story. So if you hear things about, you know, things going wrong or things going right, it's just describing the experience, right? So all stories start with a man and a woman. And so my story started also with a man and a woman who fell in love, and they had a child. And after the 9 months when it was born, it lived for 2 days and it died. And that was the child who came before me. Now there's a lot of research showing that that does a lot of things with the next kid, but anyway, that's a whole different story. And that did two things to my parents. One is that my dad kind of got very nervous and he thought, I don't know if I should be married to this woman. And my mother got very nervous because she thought, well, you know, what if I have another baby and what if the same thing happens? So the 9 months in the womb were this adrenaline ride of fear. And a lot of research shows that this actually happens. You know, the baby experiences everything that the mother is going through. So on some level, there was this very tense ride. And I wasn't really wanted either, because Dad started seeing other women, and, you know, that was very painful for Mom. And, you know, it was this very emotional experience. And it's emotional for me to tell it now. And I thought I'd be very calm and cool about it, but it's really a moving, you know, it's a moving story. So I was born, and then when I was 2 months old, my parents moved to Japan. Now, my mother had been in a Japanese concentration camp with her parents, and they're off to Japan. So my poor mom, you know, who's gone through all of this hardship, ends up going to the country which, you know, had people who you know, had been running the camp, and in the camp was a pretty tough deal. So the first 6 years of my life was dealing, you know, with all those tensions. And I mean, I love Japan, I love sushi, I love the nature, I love the Zen gardens. But there was the whole tension of a dysfunctional marriage. And what that did, what happened is there was a lot of physical abuse and there was a lot of mental abuse, and there was Dad hitting Mom. So what you do as a child, you think you have to protect your mother, right? So that's not a good place to be in. But anyway, that's how it went. So that was the first 6 years. And then we moved to Norway. Meanwhile, I had a kid sister who was born. And what happens is I was 2 years old when my kid sister was born. And of course I got jealous. You know, I was in the terrible twos, and we're in Japan, and strangely enough, I used to have hair a long time ago, believe it or not. And I had dark blonde, long hair, and my sister had jet black hair, and her eyes were a little slanted. So here we're in Japan, and there's this cute little button, you know, with black hair, little eyes. So all the attention I was getting, for what it was worth, whoop, everything went to my sister. So that was an added challenge for sure. So then we moved to Norway, and in Norway, I really connected with nature. So nature, you know, being with the animals, being with all the elements, that was really what sustained me through those very rough years. I became very good at school. I excelled academically. I had a lot of friends. I was a popular kid. I felt at home. I feel like I do here. You know, it was an international community. I felt very good. Meanwhile, though, at home, all the violence was still going on. So I saw things no kid should have seen, you know, and I really bad stuff, and I had to protect my mother, and even once my father attacked her with a knife, and it was horrible. It was not good. But anyway, I survived that. And when I was 12, we moved to Africa, to the Ivory Coast. So I went from top of my class to the bottom because it was in French. You know, and the French are wonderful, but they don't want to speak English. They're like, you know, you speak French, you know, you get on our level. So I learned French, and I was there for a year and a half. And thankfully, my parents divorced, and we were thrown in boarding school at the tender age of 12 and a half, 13. And yeah, that was a very tough time. At boarding school, basically, I was bullied for about 2.5 whole years. And there was, there was physical abuse, there was mental abuse, and the worst thing is the loneliness. I got so lonely, and I didn't think I'd be so emotional, but here we are. And I was bullied and bullied and bullied, and what happened is I went from this very extroverted kid to this very introverted, very fearful child. I was like, my life had no more meaning. We're all this beautiful spark of the divine, right? I could not see that spark. I tried to kill myself for 2 whole years. Thank God I didn't do it. I'm so grateful, appreciative I didn't do that. I don't know how I pulled through, God's grace. And after 2 years, I did the only thing that saved me. I started acting out. So I broke all the rules. I started drinking, smoking, doing drugs, hanging out with all the bad kids. It's not a good thing, but it saved me. Because when you're in depression and suicide, it's one step up, right? So amen for that. And I got kicked out of boarding school, of course, and all these wild stories were told about me, and blah, 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 and they tried to put me in this juvenile, correctional institute, and I had a great grandmother, and I talked to her, and I said, Grandma, you don't believe all this stuff, do you? I mean, I don't mean to be doing this. And she was the only one, thankfully, who said, no, I believe in you, I support in you. And, thank God for grandmothers. Really, and the thing, though, why I want to speak with you about awareness and why awareness is so important is because, and I forgot to tell that at the beginning, the thing is that I want to talk about love first, because that's my favorite topic, but when we love, awareness doesn't always, it's not always there, whereas if we're aware, love will come. So, all these educationalists while I was in boarding school, because I had terrible grades, I was acting out, so I got all these labels by all these well-meaning but not very aware people. And there was nobody who said, wait a minute, what happened to this guy? He's this really nice kid. And now all of a sudden he's this problem kid, and he was best of his class, and now all his grades have gone down the tubes. Why, suddenly I was a problem that needed fixing. So I got remedial teaching and all this kind of nonsense by all these well-meaning people, which I didn't need. I just needed love. I needed understanding. I needed somebody to be aware and say, look, come here. And we all know this, right? We've all gone through similar things, or we know people who've gone through similar things. What I didn't know then, it was going to be, a good experience for me to grow into that later on. So I got kicked out of boarding school, went to Norway, lived there for a few years, again, got top grades, became best of my class, so I was like, back on track. And moved to New York. I had long hair back then, like I was saying before. I was very androgynous, and started a company in the rag trade with a friend of mine. And we were very successful, and I had the whole glamorous lifestyle and everything God tells you, you shouldn't be doing. And meanwhile, I was very unhappy inside, of course. Married a beautiful model. Was very successful. Got approached by this famous acting coach who represents Julia Roberts, Erik and all these people. He signed me up. He said, oh, we'll make you a great actor, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, thankfully, I was on the path of awareness and consciousness and self-development and meditation. And I'm rushing a little bit because of the time constraint here. Thanks for letting me know. And so awareness started developing, and I thought Hollywood would not be conducive to that path. So I went back to Holland, studied educational psychology and psychology, started studying healing, numerology, astrology, self-development, worked with a lot of people, was allowed to do a lot of wonderful work in that area, cleaned up my act, went to my first spiritual teachers. And when you go to spiritual teachers, you're like the sorcerer's apprentice, So like in the fairy tales, the sorcerer's apprentice, you learn a lot, but you get treated terribly. So after 3 years of that, I thought, okay, that's it, enough. I want to be my own boss, I want to be in charge. Started my own company, started coaching people, training people, building awareness, meditating, doing all of the great stuff. Very appreciative for that, very grateful. It's brought me to where I am today. So to get back to where I was at the beginning, yeah, please join me in facilitating all the teachers, all the parents, all the educators in lifelong learning and building awareness. It is really crucial. And like I was saying, lose it or use it. So let's use it. Thank you very much. That's it. That's it. Thank you.